Welcome, everyone. Great to see you all. Thank you for joining us for this special LGMA Champ webinar ahead of COP29 next week. We're going to be updating you on the latest progress on JAMP, a refresh of what JAMP is, who's part of it, what the goals are, what progress has been made so far, how it links to the LGMA position paper, and then how it will be represented at COP29 and what this constituency can do to support that. And then we'll go into some Q&A. So we can go to the next slide. Just very quickly, to introduce myself, I'm Asif Shah. I work with the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy as Head of Impact and Partnerships around JAMP. And this really involves engaging with all the amazing partners within this constituency and outside that are lining up to support JAMP with us and help countries implement the pledge they took last year in Dubai. So with that, what is the pledge that countries took last year? So as you might know, JAMP is a coalition of national governments that was launched last year by the COP28 presidency and Bloomberg Philanthropies. It now includes 74 national governments. Most recently, we had Finland and the United Kingdom announcing their endorsement for JAMP. And this brings up our share of the global population represented by the members of JAMP to 34%, so over a third of the world's population, more than 60% of global GDP, and over a third of global emissions as well. What JAMP essentially does is gets countries and national governments to commit to working and coordinating more closely with subnational governments in the development, financing, implementation, and monitoring of national climate plans and strategies. This includes, obviously, the upcoming round of enhanced nationally determined contributions that are due by February 2025, though, of course, some of this will come later, but also other plans and strategies, including but not limited to NAPs, NBSAPs, and long-term low-emission development strategies. In terms of what the JAMP pledge entails specifically, there are 6 basic commitments that governments have committed to. Number 1, to consult with subnational governments in the development of climate plans and strategies, to collaborate with subnational governments to ensure that these strategies are strengthened and that there are avenues for subnational actors to contribute to the design and implementation of those strategies. Specifically looking at the NDC 3.0 process, that there are mechanisms in place for subnational governments to contribute to the enhancement of NDCs, that when developing investment and implementation plans that align with these national climate plans and strategies, that local and subnational priorities and projects are supported and prioritized within those plans, to voluntarily track and report actions that are undertaken to meet these commitments, whether through existing mechanisms such as the BTR and the UNFCCC process, or the voluntary national reviews that take place under the SDGs. And lastly, to continue to share experience, best practices, and challenges and lessons learned in implementing JAMP amongst fellow endorsers, including but not limited to at the annual JAMP high-level political dialogue, the first of which took place earlier this year in New York during Climate Week. So in terms of goals for JAMP and how we have been mobilizing ourselves amongst JAMP partners to support the delivery of JAMP by the end of 2025, by COP30, there are 2 basic things that we think this coalition should see as key outcomes. Number 1, that JAMP signatory countries develop enhanced NDCs that demonstrate stronger subnational content and that meaningfully include subnational governments in the process of developing those enhanced NDCs. So going beyond simple consultation and really institutionalizing this multi-level approach within the context of the NDCs and other plans and strategies. Number two, that as a result of this work, subnational governments in JAMP countries are able to progress, finance, and deliver a greater number of more ambitious and inclusive climate actions. And of course, both these goals can be further broken down into activities and milestones that help us get there till the end of next year. In terms of what progress has been made until this point, both at a national and a global level. At a national level, there are several countries where partners have been engaged on the ground with both national and subnational stakeholders to follow through on the JAMP commitments that have been taken. So examples from Brazil, where the new Green Resilient Cities program that the Ministry of Environment, the Ministry of Cities, and the Ministry of Science and Technology have launched together really is emblematic of the mission of the JAMP coalition and institutionalizes multi-level collaboration within this federal government program to support cities in financing high ambition climate action in their own jurisdictions. In Colombia, partners have been engaged with the national government to host workshops that inculcate contributions from subnational governments into the development of the NDC, not just the NDC itself, but also associated investment and implementation plans that clearly outline subnational projects and priorities that align with the NDC and its targets. In Morocco, similarly, engaging with the government to ensure that there's coordination between the different actors that support subnational climate action, as well as national climate action planning in the NDC process, particularly the Ministry of Interior and the Ministry of Energy Transition and Sustainable Development. And in South Korea, where recently JAMP-focused international climate conference took place with a representation both from the subnational side with the governor of Jeonnam, as well as high-level representation from the national government, really centering JAMP within the dialogue around the country's upcoming NDC. So if we move to the next slide, talking a little bit about how we're looking at this roadmap to 2025 and to COP30, and what our global advocacy goals really will be from now until then. Obviously, with 2024, we've had a busy couple of months and a busy month up ahead, starting from New York Climate Week, where the JAMP Dialogue was held, where endorsers from all over the map came together to showcase what they've been doing to highlight lessons learned and specific challenges faced in implementing their JAMP commitments, but also highlighting the successes and the breakthroughs in that engagement. Coming up to U20 and COP29, obviously there's overlap between these two events, with the U20 summit taking place from the 14th to the 17th, and then Urban Day at COP being on the 20th of November. And so we are, as supportive partners of JAMP, really looking to draw a very strong link between these two events and making sure that messages that come forth in U20, which my colleague will talk about further, really land at COP29 and are strengthened within the UNFCCC process. Moving to 2025, obviously 2025, if we just go back to that slide, could we go back to the timeline slide, please? So obviously 2025 in many years is the year of NDCs. And so that is reflected in the fact that there will be several engagements that are dedicated to looking at the updated and enhanced NDCs, the UN Secretary General's NDC conference, as well as the global NDC conference that will be taking place in June of next year. Both of those are key moments for us to show up and highlight the value of JAMP in building stronger, more implementable, more investable, and more inclusive NDCs that really mobilize all of society and all of government to deliver against their goals. Again, at the Bonn SBs and the concurrent Daring Cities forum that our partners at ICLEI host each year, we'll be using that as another key moment. Sorry, the slides have disappeared. But just to go back to that point, we'll be using that as another key moment to highlight urban continent NDCs, present some case studies and some analysis from the NDCs that have been submitted until that point. And then also use that moment to engage with parties at a more technical level to understand opportunities to formalize multi-level partnerships within the UNFCCC process. Moving forward to New York Climate Week, of course, this will be a couple of months out from COP30 in Belém, a key point to test ideas, language, and important updates that have come since the beginning of the summer, and then back towards Urban 20 and then COP30 in November in Belém. And this is really, this sort of sequence of events throughout 2025 is focused on cementing JAMP leadership within the COP agenda, getting the Brazilian COP presidency to highlight JAMP as a key part of their presidency's agenda and help us push further for this post-2025 roadmap that really sees us institutionalize multi-level action within the formal process. Move to the next slide. Just very quickly, examples of amazing subnational advocacy that has already gotten us to a great place when it comes to JAMP, both from countries that have endorsed and countries that had not endorsed but have recently endorsed. We've seen great mobilization in Germany, in the US, and Brazil with national associations of local governments and mayors coming out in support of their national government's endorsement of JAMP and encouraging them to implement that commitment in partnership with local and regional governments. So really fantastic demonstration of the power of collective local governments to advocate strongly towards the national government level. And then looking at our newest endorsements in Finland and the UK, subnational engagement and bottom-up advocacy was a key part of securing both of those national government endorsements for JAMP. Where we see the Mayor of Turku from Finland. In the UK, we had great mobilization both at the mayoral level as well as at the regional level with the governments of Wales and other regions within the UK. With that, I'm going to hand over to my colleague Ariel from ICLEI to talk a little bit more about the LGMA position and the links between JAMP and that product. Thanks, Ariel.
Hello, everyone. Great to see you today for this exciting update on JAMP as we go into COP29. As hopefully you all know, we have the LGMA joint position, which has been signed on. Now we'll have a little bit about the endorsements in a moment, but the endorsements are still open. And this was a paper put together by, I think, a drafting committee of 12 different organizations. So really a great collective work to put it together. And then we've seen great also endorsement taking up of the position. But the reason we're talking about it today, not just to hopefully motivate any of you who are on the call who haven't yet taken the time to endorse the paper or the position rather, but to also just kind of show what an important element JAMP is in the paper itself. So the way it's organized, let's see, you can go to the next slide. The way it's organized is that we have three main asks that we're looking at. The first ask is really about accelerating these NDCs, and obviously that's incredibly tied to CHAMP, and the details of this position, so of this particular ask, go into explicitly the connections between what CHAMP is trying to do and what an outcome within the negotiated outcomes at COP29 would look like, and really creates a parallel between them, with CHAMP being the kind of model for us of what we're trying to achieve. And then, of course, the other two asks, finance, and aligning all of the development agendas, including climate, nature, pollution, and the sustainable development agendas. So for each of these asks, there is party level guidance. So particularly on this first ask, I'll put the links into the chat after I'm done talking here. If you go into the party level guidance, it really goes into detail about the connections to CHAMP, and kind of what we're trying to do with this advocacy piece that hopefully our delegates are taking to COP, and advocating to their parties. So if you go to the next slide, as of this week, we have more than 70 endorsers of the position. We are, as I said, the endorsements are still open. We are going to finish the first round of endorsements by this weekend. So you still have a few more days here if you do want to join this extensive list of endorsers. That first round will be closed. We'll make kind of media announcements as COP opens with all the endorsers who've already endorsed. We are going to then have a second round of endorsements, keeping this open until the urban ministerial on the 20th. So the second week of COP on the urbanization day, to really make that link between this position and the the MAP initiative, which is part of the COP29 presidency's priorities, which also has a deep connection with this position. And so their hope is that they can have all of the endorsers, the widest number of endorsers then of this position, which also endorses the MAP initiative as well. So we're sort of working with the presidency on that to make sure that these two, the position and the MAP initiative are aligned. And so thus having these two rounds, or not rounds, but a second opportunity for more endorsers as COP sort of moves on. So yeah, that is how our constituency's position is really deeply connected to CHAMP. So obviously to all of the great work that the working group has done throughout the year, but sort of bringing that all into this tool that we hope our constituency members are using throughout COP, and which we'll be referring to as, certainly through the communications coordination, which I lead with my team for the LGMA, returning to this and making sure that CHAMP really is highlighted as a part of our position as a constituency, and then throughout the developments of the next 2 weeks of COP. So with that, I think that's the end of mine. I'll pass things over to Amelia.
Thanks, Ariel. Hi, everyone. So yeah, I'm Amelia. I'm Senior Advocacy Manager working on CHAMP at the Global Covenant of Mayors. And I'm just going to take you through today some of the activity that we have planned at COP. So as Asif has talked about, this marks 1 year on since the launch of CHAMP. So one of our major objectives is really around maintaining momentum for the initiative and also securing new endorsements. We also want to really provide a moment for accountability and optimism. So accountability for those who are already part of the coalition, and also optimism and showcasing that best practice and where there has been progress on NDCs. So we'll be rapidly reviewing any that are released, and it's going to be great to share intel amongst the LGMA constituency on those as they come out. Thirdly, we're preparing and supporting Brazil for their hopeful leadership on CHAMP, and really hoping that kind of continues into COP30. And lastly, as Ariel covered, inputting into the formal negotiations and UNFCCC process with this real longer term goal of embedding CHAMP outcomes into sort of official COP outcomes. So I just wanted to share today some key messages that we'll be working on as a team, and these will also be shared in a sort of standalone CHAMP briefing that will complement very much the LGMA position paper. So first of all, seeking for more parties to be joining CHAMP, and also for existing coalition members to deliver on their pledge. So that includes including subnational governments, investing in subnational action, and implementing projects in subnational spaces to really support delivering a 1.5 degrees pathway. Secondly, subnational governments globally need public investment from national governments and development financial institutions. So acknowledging this as a finance COP and that at U20 there is going to be a lot of work on finance, we'll be looking at how to kind of bring those messages forward from mayors speaking at the U20 into the COP space. And we'll be covering that in more detail on the 18th of November, which I'll come to in a second once we're on the ground. And then lastly, really looking for parties to ensure the negotiated outcomes of COP29 reflect the spirit of CHAMP and also advance the global stocktake. And Eunice is going to talk in a minute about some of those different negotiating streams. So just to quickly cover some of the activities that we have. So the events here are being sort of organised or strongly supported by CHAMP partners, lots of people on this call, but really we would welcome the opportunity for CHAMP messaging to carry across all partner events. So we will be sharing a short briefing to support you in that. And we're aware of lots of country pavilions putting on great opportunities linked to CHAMP, as well as some other spaces too. So on the 18th, we're really pleased to be partnering with the LGMA on a technical briefing. So that's at the standard LGMA briefing time in the Multilevel Action and Urbanisation Pavilion. And we'll talk there a bit more about finance. And then on the following day, on the 19th, we have 3 events that I wanted to bring to everyone's attention. One is sort of with some partners on this call, we'll be bringing subnational leaders to speak about CHAMP implementation and success stories. Another is in the Regional Foundations Pavilion, which is similar, a little bit more focused on NDCs. And the audience there is really just trying to reach a little bit beyond our own constituency and try and get that message to go a bit further. And then lastly, there's a private VIP dinner on the 19th, which will include subnational leaders, climate experts and partners, and hopefully some national governments. And then, of course, there's been a lot of work from lots of people on this call for the Urban Ministerial, which will be contributing CHAMP messaging to and speakers. But I know that lots of you will be aware of that too. I think that's it from me. And we can take some questions at the end, but I'm going to hand over to Eunice now to talk about how you can support CHAMP.
Thank you, Amelia. And of course, to Asif and Ariel and to all the partners. Indeed, in my capacity as the LGMA focal point, we have been delighted to see the momentum generated through the CHAMP and the overall advocacy in Dubai or following up from Dubai. As you have heard, CHAMP is a voluntary initiative, but the momentum through CHAMP was instrumental to ensure also an agreed negotiated outcome in Dubai, paragraph 161, which refers to the parties are urged for multi-level action. So it's like a complementary process. You all know that UNFCCC is as a multilateral environmental agreement is a soft law, and implementation is rather depends on the ownership of the national governments, and an initiative like CHAMP is in fact giving like the good practice on how this could be delivered so that the others who have not signed up could also be inspired. In that regard, we will continue this approach, saying that those with the friendly countries, which we have been also starting since 2013, UNFCCC Friends of Multi-Level Action or endorsers of CHAMP, we will be actively engaging with them, but we will also make sure the negotiated outcomes of the UNFCCC also builds on this principle so that it becomes a mainstream for every country. If you go to the next slide, that's how we will approach to Dubai, to the 2 weeks of negotiation in Baku. We all know that every COP, the dynamics, the sequence of events are different, and this also shapes the way engaged with the agenda and with the negotiations. You have heard we are talking numerous times. We are referencing to the urbanization ministerial meeting on urban and climate, urbanization and climate, which will be a special presidency event of COP29, similar to what has been the case in Dubai with COP28 presidency, as well as the case in Sharm el-Sheikh with the COP27 presidency. So this is the third year in a row this meeting is taking place, but this is still a voluntary initiative of the presidency. So our hope is that if we can make sure, and for this year especially, in Dubai, we had it in the first week. This year, it's the end of the second week, which means during in Baku, in the 10 days before our ministerial, there will be so many negotiations taking place, and it will be good and it will be essential for us to engage in these negotiations from mitigation to adaptation, loss and damage to others, so that the principles that we have been aspired in CHAMP is reflected to these outcomes. And therefore, our 2 weeks of presence in Baku, including multi-level action and urbanization pavilion, which will always be our daily hub for our assessment of our progress in the negotiations through our daily briefings, will be helpful for us so that before we go to the urbanization ministerial, we make progress. In that regard, those who are familiar, the agenda has been announced in Baku. There will be a World Climate Action Summit at the heads of state and governments level on the 12th and 13th of November. And the good news is that there will be a high-level event on urban side. We are calling that urban side event. It will be the announcement of the COP29 Baku Continuity Initiative. But we will also use this as an important moment to elevate the profile of our initiatives. This is, of course, again, the Climate Action Summit is semi-official. These side events are still not in the official agenda of the negotiation. So we will do our best to continue this effort, especially in the subsidiary body meeting, which is the first 6 days of the COP. Those who are familiar, we are talking about 2 weeks of COP, but the first week is the technical negotiations, and the second week is namely the ministerial ones. During the technical negotiations, this year we have a unique opportunity, which is the mitigation work program. Throughout 2024, they focused on cities, buildings, and urban systems. LGMA was actively involved in both sessions in Bonn and in Sharm el-Sheikh. This is the first time since 2013 the UNFCCC negotiators are having a spatial negotiation, which means it's not just a workshop, it is not just an exchange of views, but also driving some outcomes, driving some conclusions that will help in the implementation of the UNFCCC. So that's a very important opportunity for us. The good news, we have already seen so many positive reflections from parties compared to the last workshop in 2013 in Warsaw. The atmosphere, both in Bonn and Sharm el-Sheikh, regards to use of urbanization and multi-level action as a mechanism to support the mitigation ambition was fantastically positive. So that's really showing the CHAMP initiative being timely. So on the first week, we will follow. There will be a contact group. There will be a discussion on the report, and we will make sure there will be some resolutions or conclusions. If we can make this bridge between this mitigation work program conclusions and the urbanization ministerial outcome document, then we can make sure the COP29 presidency, when take the leadership in the second week, can feed more ambitious outcomes into the negotiated outcomes. This will give us the chance that in the year ahead, when they prepare NDCs with a much more robust text on multi-level NDCs or urbanization, our chances will be much higher to make sure that at home we can reach to our parties, national governments, that they feed into their NDC planning. There will be, of course, you all remember finance. Finance has a number of elements. The first one, these abbreviations, I know it may not make that much sense, but the first type of discussions will be on scaling up the volume of global climate finance from global north to global south, the new quantified goal on climate. We are talking about 100 billion per year, and the goal is that by 2030, this reaches to trillions of dollars that goes from global north to global south. Obviously, this will have impacts, and this will have relevance to our members in the global north in terms of contributing to this budget, but this will also have connections to our members in the global south, so that when this money is collected, this can directly access to the urbanization at the multi-level and the multi-level action in their cities. The second part of the finance negotiations is related to the non-market approaches. Urbanization is something more than markets, and we are trying to make sure that the urban planning models can be part of the non-market approaches, which will be discussed under 6.8, and the fund for response to loss and damage, which is the famous fund that was created. There is the debate since Dubai. There has been technical meetings. The board has met. We are trying to make sure that the term direct access of subnational governments could be materialized in the right moment, in the right space, so that we can continue to be engaged in this fund. During these 2 weeks, starting from the 13th or 14th onward, 14th November onwards, there will be several ministerial dialogues. There will be ministerial dialogues on just transition, finance, adaptation finance, pre-2030 ambition. We will have LGMA representatives to speak in these slots with 2 minutes or 3 minutes. Obviously, when we get the outcome from Rio, we will also feed this on the second week of negotiations. And with all these momentum and wave of surging of these activities and dialogues, we will come to urbanization ministerial, and the presidency will get the conclusions from this meeting, hopefully to the negotiated text that they will be leading on the last days of the COP. So we will still have 2 more days for the conclusion of COP after our urbanization ministerial. This still gives us the chance that the momentum can still be feeding us into the negotiated outcome, so that we can celebrate another decision. We had celebrated COP28 decision on paragraph 161, which is urging parties for multi-level action. And with this mobilization throughout these 2 weeks, maybe we can celebrate another Baku COP29 decision, this time formulating what can it look like a multi-level action and urbanization in the climate space. So that's our challenge. The LGMA will make sure that this spirit is connected to the CHAMP implementation, and this will be our collective effort throughout those 2 weeks. So in that regard, in summary, we will make sure when we interact with the national governments, we will bring the value of CHAMP. We will make sure there will be new endorsements. We are very happy that, especially after the New York Summit, New York Climate Week, we have been, during the Sharm el-Sheikh Mitigation Work Program, there had been several interactions. I don't want to name, but there are several global South countries seriously discussing. So we hope maybe either at the beginning of Baku COP29 or on the 20th of November, we can announce some new endorsements. And then we can really bring this to the attention. Here you can see a list of, let's say, around 20-25 countries from global north and global south. We're really very excited with their motivation with the meetings. The countries, for example, Gambia, who has been very active in the mitigation work program, Tunisia, Somalia. We are aware Malaysia will be also interesting, because the former UN Habitat Executive Director is now the first mayor of Kuala Lumpur. She is coming in the first week of COP, and she will be part of the World Climate Action Summit because she's member of the COP29 advisory group. The countries like Indonesia could also be interesting for us. So there is a number of potential countries that we can really celebrate on the 20th of November as the new endorsers to CHAMP. And therefore, we would be very happy if all the LGMA partners, be it in Baku, but maybe even more important at home, to push their delegations in the capitals and also in the delegation who are in Baku, so that we make sure that there is a result that is available and we can celebrate. Back to you, Amelia.
I think Asif is going to take us through Q&A.
Thank you. Thank you, Eunice. Thank you, Amelia, Ariel. And thank you all for listening so patiently. We'd love to hear your questions, your thoughts, feedback, if you have it, any updates that might relate to the ones that we've shared. And I'll just note that Amelia will be putting into the chat a copy of the slides in case there's something you'd like to reference related to any comments you have. So please either raise your hand using the Zoom Reacts function, or you can put a question into the chat and we will pick that up. So thank you, Eva. Good to see you again. So I think in terms of how the JAM pledge is formulated, 2025 is really seen as that initial milestone where we want the JAMP approach to have been tested and demonstrate the value of multi-level engagement, not just to NDCs, but broader climate policy planning and implementation, and translating what happens in the UNFCCC space to more concrete outcomes in terms of domestic implementation. And so in terms of time frame, when NDCs are due in Feb, I mean, we're aware that that's a deadline that was set in the UAE consensus, but we also know that these deadlines aren't always met. And so I don't think February will see all of the NDCs submitted, but I think by COP30, we'd be in a good place with most of those submissions. And that COP30 will really be a kind of stocktake moment for us as a JAMP, as supporters of JAMP, and for the countries that have endorsed. And so we'll be looking to demonstrate the impact of the work that we've done, and then using that over the course of next year, chalk out what a post-2025 roadmap for JAMP and this agenda overall looks like. So the hope is, and the idea is, that this is a long-run initiative, but I think any long-run initiative needs a phase where things are being piloted and tested, and there is a certain amount of evidence that backs up the value of that initiative existing in the long run. Yunus, do you want to come in?
As if I also wanted to contribute in this discussion, because Eva raised a very important point. This 10 or 6 months ahead of the COP, a deadline to set, is in fact that is coming from the Kyoto era, when the country's national commitments were under scrutiny and compliance of the UN people or UN teams. You remember with the Paris Agreement, when the NDC logic was introduced, this also was changed. It's not anymore UNFCCC putting any more compliance, but rather UNFCCC and UN system is rather encouraging and welcoming what is available and what is agreed at the capital level. And this flexibility was considered as both the weakness and the strength of the Paris Agreement. Weakness in the sense that there had been cases that some parties, because of the change in their national governments, could revise their commitments, and they can even be less ambitious, or they can even question their commitments. We have seen this in Brazil, we have seen this in the USA. But the same speed of pulling out can also be followed when the countries want to raise their ambition. This was also the case in the case of US. The Biden administration came back to a Paris Agreement, and in 3 months they have made a new NDC, and they particularly said that because we are ambitious, because of our cities, states, and tribes, the US NDC is much more ambitious. And of course, starting from yesterday, we're expecting some new things to come from the US, the new government, and even the countries who have been going through elections. So this February date is not written on stone. And it is always possible that any party can bring a new NDC anytime. This depends on the speed in their national capitals. And that's the reason why it's important that the local and subnational governments continuously keep a pressure and keep a dialogue with their national governments, so that in case they see any reluctance, they can react, or they can offer their support so that they can be more ambitious. We had good cases, we had bad cases, and we will see more on those. That's why we always have to be alert, and we all have to be always interacting, having their dialogues open with the national governments.
Thank you, Eunice, and thank you, Eva, for the question. And I think I'd just add to that, basically what Eunice said at the end. I think we're also in a stage where the COP process is transitioning and shifting from a place where countries come to make pledges and commitments to where countries have to implement those pledges and commitments on the ground. And I think where JAMP can really be positioned is as a response to that transition, right? So if countries are looking to implement their pledges and their commitments on the ground, who are the partners? They need to be working with and engaging in making sure that implementation is happening. And I think when we show such a mobilization from the subnational community, we position subnationals as critical partners in that implementation. Ariel?
I actually have a question for all of you, which is about the endorsements that came last year from the various national local government associations. So with Brazil and not endorsements, but kind of the play or the statements of support for CHAMP. So with the Brazilian front, I can't remember the name of it now, but then also with the mayors, I'm forgetting all of the names of the Mayors Federation in the US and Deutsche Städtetag here in Germany. What role do you think those kinds of supportive statements play? And do you foresee, as we look to sort of round out the number of country endorsers in the future, do you think those types of endorsements are like a nice to have or really great for local and regional governments who are working with their national associations to pursue? Just wondering what your perspective is on that.
Sorry, Ariel, was that a question for
Eunice, Amelia, or you, Asif? Anyone who has an opinion on that? Sorry to put you on the spot, but it was something I was thinking about recently.
Eunice?
I mean, thanks for the opportunity, Ariel. Indeed, this bringing national associations into the game with a German, Brazilian, and US Conference of Mayors was something that was already embedded in the initial texts of the CHAMP, and we just made it practically possible. And I think that's the reason the national associations have not been too much involved in the climate debate. We had individual cities, ambitious cities, progressive cities, but there was never a national level dialogue at the national level. The logic is that the NDCs is now being designed today in the next couple of months, so that if we can bring different diversity of national, all types of local governments into a dialogue with the Ministry of Environment or Minister of Urbanization, that could also make sure that this is a collective effort, because then it will be a commitment at the national level, which will fall into different cities in a different manner, different way. For example, this has been the case. For example, the Chinese NDC, they have allocated different mitigation commitments to different provinces. So every country, national associations can play an active role in shaping this design. As much as 200 nations we have 200 different governance models. And even inside, the way London Metropolitan and the Bristol is engaged with the national level is different, because there are different modalities. So I think this we are seeing the value of this collective engagement, and we hope this will be a complementary to the efforts of the Minister of Environment, so that they can reach out to different national actors. And again, this was the case implemented in Japan or Dominican Republic or even Rwanda. So a lot of models can give us some good practices on that.
And just to add there, I mean, I think there's some cases where national associations of local governments are actually mandated to represent the priorities and needs of their members to the national governments in these processes. I'm thinking of South Africa, for example. And so definitely want to leverage those mechanisms as much as possible where they exist and where they are strong. Because I think one thing about CHAMP is we're fully cognizant that there are many countries in the world where these processes already exist and where this engagement already takes place. So CHAMP is not just a movement to spur more countries to do this, but also to bring more visibility to places and mechanisms where this is already happening.
Asif, sorry, I'm just reading the messages. Ola, thanks a lot for this Norwegian example. Can you send it any document to us so that while we are talking in Baku, we can use this? There will be a lot of interactions. We are now one of the countries that we are very heavily working is Sweden. And Sweden is the only Scandinavian country who has not endorsed. And there is a number of events with the Swedish government, Swedish pavilion. So this good practice will be really helpful for us. Sorry, Asif, I just jumped in, but I think that was an opportunity to highlight that. And I see Ole reacting.
Really great point. Ole, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mentioned this because we have this process going on, and I think that was a wake-up call, at least for Norwegian government in Dubai last year. And we were on to them all the time during the COP28 and also afterwards. But it's the first time that when there are new NDCs coming up now, that they really address all levels of government, NGOs, and so forth. But it is a very national process, so I don't have anything in English at the moment, and we are asked to have an input by end of this year, and we are currently writing on it now, and we will try to interlink in our position that there are a clear link to this CHAMP initiative, that at least we will look upon it as a part of it. And I think it has been important because knowing this from earlier years, that it has been very difficult to be in real dialogue. And now they have done it, and we have not asked particularly to this to happen this year. I have also been in contact with the Swedish Association of Local and Regional Governments. So they are in the move on something about this, because we have the Nordic meetings twice a year, and I put forward all the outcomes from Dubai in a meeting in Helsinki in this May. And then I showed the whole NDC process, because I needed to find a way to express this in a manner that others that are not so linked to the processes to understand what's this is actually going on. And I know that I got a very good feedback from Finland at that time, and now they have joined, and not because of me, of course, but because they were in the process for it. And now I had this dialogue also for the Swedish Association to push national government, but there are also a little bit to do with who is in charge in the country at the moment, so they have been struggling a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ole. I think that's really, really helpful. I think one thing to flag there, and I think this speaks to Gokshin's question in the chat as well. When it comes to capturing some of this activity that is taking place, we're really keen on getting information as much as possible. So I understand you don't have information available in English at this moment. If and when that does become available, please do share it with us. Our partners at the World Resources Institute have been running a survey of CHAMP endorsers. It's been a bit difficult to get countries to submit responses to the survey. It's about the NDC 3.0 process, and obviously different countries are at different stages. The deadline for that is the 30th of November. So we're happy to share that information with this group as well after the webinar. If there's mechanisms by which you can make asks of the federal government that you engage with to respond to that survey, because that will then feed a summary of activities, an interim summary of activities report that was initially supposed to be launched at COP, but has now been delayed to after potentially December or Q1 of next year. And that will outline how CHAMP is being progressed in different contexts and geographies. And that interim summary report will then be a sort of final summary report by COP30, taking into account the collective experience that has been amassed throughout the NDC 3.0 process. So to answer your question, Gokshin, that is something we're definitely looking at in that February to December timeframe next year. I'm just looking at some of the other questions, conscious we don't have too much time. Will the impact, Eva, your question on impact monitoring. So this isn't something that will necessarily be monitored by the presidency troika. This was since CHAMP was launched outside the formal negotiation process and as part of the action agenda, it was launched by the COP28 presidency, but it does not fall within the ambit of the troika's mandate as such. And so we are working with the COP presidency and the UAE to help monitor and track this impact. And that's why engagement with this constituency is so incredibly important, to make sure we're getting both that national government perspective, but also the perspective from the ground and from the local and regional authorities who are actually being engaged through CHAMP. On the EU implementation strategy, that is a fantastic question. I don't have a ready-to-go answer for you at this stage, given where the Commission is. But we hope early next year to have more information. And of course, we're in touch with you already about that. I'm just seeing whether there is any other questions. Does anyone want to come off mute and ask something, perhaps, before we conclude?
Asif, I have a question.
Yes, Togo, hi.
Hi, regarding that WI survey, can you also share the contact points, who you have contacted to send that survey? Because I want to follow up to make sure that our government is responding to that.
Sure. I'll have to take a look and see whether Japan is one of the countries that has responded. I'll let you know. But
Yeah.
as far as the contact points, they were the CHAMP focal points that were assigned by each country when the endorsement was initially made. So I believe you already know who that is for Japan, but I'll confirm over email.
I think it would be a good opportunity if we contact them during COP, because I think that would be the right time to follow up on this survey.
Absolutely. So I will connect with you and Eunice bilaterally, because Japan is definitely on our list to connect with at COP.
And just one follow-up question, Asif, if I may. Togo, are you expecting any changes in the staff or leadership level of the Japanese Minister of Environment after the new administration?
Yes, but don't worry about that. It's okay.
So I mean, it's especially to keep the relations. I mean, I'm not changing and expecting a change in the position, but it's at the end of the day personal relations that really help us a lot.
No, in terms of CHAMP, don't worry too much, because it's being managed by the lower ends of the staff level, and the high end, like Vice Minister and Minister level, they are pretty much supportive all the way, whoever it is in that position.
This point particularly applies. It's a point where for all our colleagues, because in many cases our partners, the staff who are following the CHAMP agenda, and the Minister of Environment or Minister of Environment Relations, it may be possible that because of the restrictions of the budget for this year's COP, it's much smaller delegation size in many countries, they may not travel. So they may still be at home. So it will be still keep these people connected, because they can communicate online. Even the delegations that we do not know in person in Baku, the delegations we are in touch should be feeding them and then asking them to follow the agenda for CHAMP. So that kind of a mobilization we have to also follow up.
Fantastic. I've just put this in the chat as well, but if there are questions around new endorsers, whether that's on the European continent or anywhere else, please do not hesitate to reach out to me, of course, to Eunice and the LGMA. And we also have a CHAMP sort of support email That is champ@gcomprojectsupport.org. I've put that into the chat, so just for your reference. Great. We are just about at time. Unless there's any last questions, I think we can call it a day. And thank you guys so much for showing up, for all your engagement and your questions. Look forward to meeting those of you who will be in Baku there. Otherwise, look forward to staying connected and engaging further around CHAMP on the road to COP30. Thank you so much and take care, everyone.
Thank you, Asif. Bye, everyone.